So I'm sure you've heard by now, but Russia is strongly considering invading parts of eastern Ukraine. I'm sure you've also heard by now that Joe Biden is strongly considering deploying American troops to the region. My question is, should we as conservative Americans care about this conflict? And my answer is no. I don't see how it's our business. This is a really complicated conflict that really America has no stake in. And quite frankly, you look at the current state of America in many aspects, and you look at the fact, speaking of invasions, that there literally is an invasion happening at our borders. And I don't just mean that in like the rhetorical conservative campaign sense. I mean that what you're seeing in our immigration system is literally a concerted effort to hand foreigners political, cultural, social, and economic control over the United States. By definition, the point of an invasion. Let's put America first. Let's clean up our own room before we try to clean up other people's room. But I will also say to people who do think that this conflict is America's business, that the whole Russia versus Ukraine thing is not exactly this whole black and white, good versus evil battle of Russian Marxist communists and Western democracy that it will be painted to you as in the media, in the foreign policy DC establishment. The truth about this situation is that it's incredibly complicated. There are many angles to this, whether that's historic Russian control over the region or Russian ethnic minorities in these places, or the fact that the very regions being contested want to secede from Ukraine anyway, right? There's just a lot to this conflict. And to be completely honest, it's really not all that different from the complete mess and, just complicated situation that we got stuck in the Middle East for many decades. It's really not that different. But you know what? Let me also say something that will really strike deep in the nerves of the conservative American heart. Let me say something that is basically heresy to say in a lot of conservative circles, but is simply true nonetheless to all of these people. What exactly do you even think that you're fighting for? Because considering the fact that, unlike the leaders of America, Vladimir Putin actually believes that Christianity is the moral foundation behind his country and believes that his country should be one nation under God, considering the fact that Vladimir Putin rejects wokeism and thinks that it's a poison to healthy societies, considering the fact that Vladimir Putin actually believes that men are not women and believes that marriage is a moral covenant between a man and a woman, considering the fact that Vladimir Putin believes that families, not banks or corporations, but families are the bedrock of his society and thinks that he should be encouraging people to get married and having children, not discouraging it, let me ask the genuine question. What exactly do you think you're fighting for? I mean, I know, it's heresy to even speak like this, but genuinely, considering all of that, I think, for their sake, I'd much rather see the Russian flag fly over some random faraway foreign land than I would prefer to see the Black Lives Matter or LGBT flag or any other godless, degenerate, evil, immoral symbol of the modern globalist American empire. I know that's a hot take, but that's something that I genuinely believe. And I would also say, to people who don't really get it, let me just say, maybe that there's a reason. Considering all that I just named about Putin's leadership style, Putin's beliefs, maybe there's a reason why the sort of neoliberal establishment in America teaches you from birth to hate Vladimir Putin so much. I mean, look, maybe there's a reason. That's all I'll say, okay? But what I will say finally, lastly, is for people who still think that this is our business, still think that we as Americans have a place in this conflict, let me lastly ask you, what exactly do you think that we're going to do? Okay, what are we going to do to stop this big incursion on Western democracy or whatever? What's your solution? Are we going to put sanctions on them? Well, that clearly didn't work, because remember that we tried to do that in 2014 when Russia annexed Crimea, and clearly by the fact that they're still trying to annex parts of eastern Ukraine, clearly the sanctions don't work. So you're going to have to go to kind of a more drastic measure than that. What, are you going to act tough? You're going to pull like a Ronald Reagan and basically flex American might and talk Vladimir Putin out of doing this? Yeah, well, I hate to break it to you, I don't think that Joe Biden is exactly really the guy to do that. I don't think Joe Biden is some type of intimidating figure here that can diffuse the situation. So lastly, what you're really leading towards is some type of military intervention in Ukraine. I mean, really, that's what we're leading towards. That seems to be what a lot of people are suggesting that we do. But let me remind you that, Russia is not Iraq and this is not Kuwait in the 1990s. Russia is a nuclear-armed world power here, okay? We're not talking about some, dinky military that we can easily defeat. Russia has nukes. Let me remind you with that. And let me remind you, this would not be a proxy war if you're suggesting this. You're suggesting that Russians and Americans will be shooting at each other on the same battlefield. And again, considering that we are nuclear-armed powers, yeah, how exactly do you think that's going to end? What is the actual point of even trying or wanting to do that? And even if you scale it back a little bit, even if you say, well, maybe we don't need to do that. In order to stop this from happening, all we need to do is add Ukraine to NATO. That's what I'm seeing a lot of talk of as well, adding Ukraine to NATO. But again, let me reiterate that NATO is a, conventional but also nuclear defense pact. Okay, the premise behind NATO is that if a foreign country, let's say hypothetically, attacked Ukraine, it would be our duty to respond, not with sanctions, not with anything, but with full military force. And let me ask you again, how do you think that's going to end? Oh, hey, I think I kind of remember when George Washington, the literal father of America, warned us about not entering and tangling foreign alliances. I think I also remember when Donald Trump, the leader of our modern movement here, basically did the same and raised the same exact question when it came to NATO and raised that same concern. So with that being said, why do people think it's a good idea to add a country like Ukraine, right? This is a country that's on the Eastern Bloc towards Russia, right? This is a country in an extremely volatile and unstable kind of part of the world. Same thing with Turkey. Why do people think that it's a good idea to add volatile countries who are always basically the center of conflict to NATO, which I will reiterate again is a nuclear defense pact? Why should we add countries who are basically always suckering themselves into war or basically are always the hotbed of war? Why should we be adding these types of countries to a total defense pact that includes nuclear defense? I don't see the logic here, and I know people will say, well, isn't Turkey in NATO? And Turkey already is a very volatile country in a very volatile region. And let me say, I'm against that too. I too believe that Turkey should be kicked out of NATO, but the solution is to kick Turkey out of NATO. The solution is to remove these sort of unstable countries that, by the way, are not an original part of NATO, remove them from the pact so that way we're not always dealing with constant guaranteed defense for countries that don't deserve it and will always basically leech off of us when it comes to that. That's the solution. Not to add more countries, not to add Ukraine and a bunch of other countries. It's not a good idea, okay? Unstable, volatile regions of the world do not belong in NATO for a reason that I think is pretty obvious, but people don't seem to understand. So, in conclusion here, folks, 4 reasons that I believe are both moral and practical. Okay, practical in the sense that this is really just not our business, and also moral in the sense that what the modern American empire stands for is, quite frankly, not worth defending on its own, much worse actively forcing onto other parts of the world. For both of those reasons, I really have to say, don't buy this hype, okay? It is not America's job to get involved in the conflict. I don't believe conservatives should support intervention in this conflict whatsoever. And that's it, okay? That's what I have to say. You can disagree with me. You can falsely, of course, accuse me of working for the Russian government, which, let me just say, is not true, okay? But that's where it is. That's where we stand, okay? With that being said, folks, thank you very much for watching this video. Be sure to leave a like. Be sure to subscribe. Be sure to consider becoming a member for very epic perks. I have a members exclusive video coming out this week about small town America. It's very wholesome. It's a very epic video, okay? I'm going to tell the story of how I got these old school antique postcards from the 1900s. What did he mean by this? What is going on in this video? Again, you have to become a member to find out why I have this postcard from 1912 or something, okay? Become a member to see it. All right, with that being said, folks, Alpha moves only. See you guys next time, and peace.
Americanism, not globalism, will be our credo as long